Hey everyone, this is Dual Credit Biology 1, Unit 2, Lecture number 4. Today we're going to talk about macromolecules, just in general, how we make a macromolecule, how we break a macromolecule, and then we're going to look specifically at one type, which are the carbohydrates. There are 2 more lectures after this one where we will cover the other 3 types of macromolecules, and then we will be finished with this unit on organic chemistry. So let me go ahead and share my screen so that we can get to the PowerPoint. Once again, I would suggest pulling the PowerPoint up so you could kind of follow along with us and make a few notes here or there. So I want to talk about the structure and the function of macromolecules first. So macromolecules, the name, when you look at it, we of course know micro. I know everyone knows micro means small. Well, macro is the opposite. It means really large. So basically, it's a whole lot of small links that are put together and form this really big molecule that we know as a macromolecule. So it's a really large molecule joined by little small units or links. We sometimes call these polymers because they have a lot of these little links, and poly, of course, means many. So a monomer is an individual link in the chain. So a polymer is a lot of those links joined together to form this molecule that will do some type of function or serve a purpose within a living organism. So the way that we make a polymer is something that we call condensation synthesis, or I learned it as dehydration synthesis. We all know that when you dehydrate something or you become dehydrated, you've lost water. You don't have enough water, or you've removed the water from that particular substance. If you dehydrate, meat to make jerky, you're taking all the water out of it so that it will last. Well, dehydration synthesis is basically the same thing. What happens is you remove a water from these 2 individual smaller chains. You remove a water, and then that allows them to have a place that they can join. And so either it's one monomer and another monomer, they remove a water, now they have a place to join, or it could be 2 smaller polymers that join to make a larger polymer. And I'm going to show you a picture of this in these next couple slides. So if we want to break a polymer to get either small monomers or 2 smaller polymers, it's the complete opposite, and we do something called hydrolysis. And if you break the word hydrolysis apart, hydro means water and lysis means split, and those are 2 very important prefix suffixes that you need to know for science, and basically it'll help you in a lot of classes if you know that hydro means water, lysis means to split. So what happens is you add water and it breaks a polymer in 2, and this is important because when you eat foods that have these polymers in them, or macromolecules, our body may not be able to use that large molecule. So by adding water to it, it breaks it into smaller pieces so that it can be used by our cells. So that's why hydrolysis is important. So here's a picture of how it all works, because I know it's probably fuzzy in your head. So here's a short polymer. It's going to have 3 carbons, and right here this OH is telling me, this has got a hydroxyl on there, so that's an alcohol, and I want to hook this monomer onto it. Well, they won't connect because there's no spare places, because all of the bonds, all the potential places to bond are used up. So what happens is the OH on this monomer connects with the hydrogen on this polymer. They pull off as H2O, and now you have a spare electron that needs a partner on each one of these carbons. So boom, they form a bond. So pulling out a water makes it longer. It builds it. So removing water builds. It's the exact opposite for breaking. You add the water, it splits this bond, and now you have 2 smaller polymers, or in this case, a smaller polymer and a monomer. So add water to split. So take out water to build, add water to break, okay? So we do this when we're putting together any of our macromolecules or taking apart any of our macromolecules. And there are four main types of macromolecules. And you've studied this in Biology 1, but for some of y'all that may have been a while ago, and I know you don't go nearly as in depth as we're fixing to go, so you need to pay close attention. But the four types are carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. Today we're going to tackle carbohydrates. It's not that difficult. Then we're going to get to lipids and nucleic acids. We're going to do those together. And we save proteins for last because it's a little more complex. So let's talk a little bit about carbs. So carbs are delicious. Everybody likes a carb. If you like bread, if you like pasta, if you like donuts, you like carbs. If you like rice, you like carbs. Carbohydrates are important. We need carbs because they are fuel. They give us fuel. They give us energy. One of the fad diets that's out there right now is keto diet. The keto diet basically cuts out all of your carbohydrates. And if you talk to an individual when they start keto, they go through something called ketosis, and it's their body literally does not know what to do for fuel. And so there's a little stall out for about 3 days called the keto flu, where you don't know where to get your energy from. So you get really dizzy, you feel sometimes nauseated, your body is just exhausted, you feel yourself wanting to sleep all the time. And it's because your body has to be trained to start burning the fat for fuel rather than burning carbs for fuel. So they are important for carbs. And even on a keto diet, you don't cut out all of your carbs. You are not on a zero carb diet because you have to have some carbs. So you're just reducing your number of carbs to a very minuscule amount to train your body to burn fat rather than to burn carbohydrates. So the carbs that you do take in are used as building materials. They're also used as receptors on your cells. So, regardless of what the diet is, you have to have some carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. 3 elements are what build all of your carbohydrates. And carbon and oxygen are in a 1-to-1 ratio. So when you look at like a general formula of a carbohydrate, they say it's CH2O. So it's 1 carbon to every 1 oxygen, and then there's 2 hydrogens attached. So that's how we build our carbohydrates. So there's different kinds of carbs. You have it's all sugars, and it's how many sugars you put together. So you have monosaccharides, you have disaccharides, you have oligosaccharides, and then you have polysaccharides. We're going to take just a second and kind of run through what these are. So monosaccharides, of course, we know the prefix mono means one. So it's one sugar. Saccharide means sugar. And it's very simple. Typically, when you look at a monosaccharide, it's anywhere between 3 to 7 carbons long. Usually they're in a linear form, but they can be in a ring form. Some of them are known as aldoses or ketoses. It just depends on where you find the carbonyl group. If it's an aldose, it's going to be at the end. If it's a ketose, it's going to be found in the middle. So simple sugars are important because our body typically breaks down really complex sugars into the simple sugars so that we can use them. One example would be glucose. We use glucose, it's a simple sugar. And we need it, of course, because that's the fuel for cellular respiration. So we also have some others. Ribose, that's a pentose sugar. That's actually in a ring, and we find that in RNA. And then we have some ketoses down here that show you where the carbonyl group is. And of course, because it's in the middle, that's what makes it a ketose. So some examples of simple sugars besides glucose would be galactose, ribose, and then fructose or fructose. That's found in fruits. Your fruits do have sugars, and I didn't realize how much sugar was in fruits when I was younger. Now I do, but when I was younger, I had a grandparent who was diabetic, and he could not eat fruit after a certain time at night because if he did, his blood sugar jumped through the roof. And it was, fruit that you knew it was sweet, but you didn't think it would be that sweet, like an orange. And it would make his blood sugar spike at night. So he had to be really careful about when he ate fruit. He ate fruit. He just had to eat it during the day when he knew he could burn off that sugar and not go to bed on that sugar. So, our fruits have a lot of sugar in them. That's why on the keto diet, you're only allowed certain fruits, berries, strawberries, raspberries, blueberries. You can't eat like apples and oranges and bananas and things like that because they're high in sugar, and that bumps you out of ketosis, and so the keto diet won't work for you. So a disaccharide is a sugar, and it's two monosaccharides hooked together, and they have a special bond that's known as a glycosidic linkage. You may want to highlight that. That's a specific bond that's found in this particular, in sugars. And so depending on where the bond is, depends on how it's going to be named. When you look at these rings, rings are the carbons are given numbers. So like in this case, if we're going to put these two glucoses together, we would form this 1,4 glycosidic linkage here, and that forms a maltose. So these are two 6-carbon rings. They're put together, and they form now a 12-carbon ring or 12-carbon chain, and it's known as maltose. Right here, you have a 6 and a 5 carbon. Put them together with a 1,2 glycosidic linkage, and you form a whole new type of sugar. So some examples, maltose, which is like a milk sugar, glucose and glucose, lactose, it is a milk sugar, and then sucrose. Where do we hear sucrose? That's table sugar, and that's glucose and fructose put together. So when you put sugar like in your coffee or sugar that you put on your cereal, things like that, that's sucrose, table sugar. So an oligosaccharide, this is a type of sugar that doesn't get talked a lot about in Biology 1, but I like to put it out there so that you just have kind of an idea and, like a prior knowledge if you see it in college in another class somewhere. It's a simple sugar. Well, it's made of simple sugars, usually 3 to 10 of them put together. Oligosaccharides are found a lot in cell membranes. So when we talk about carbs being found in a cell membrane, which we'll discuss later on when we discuss the cell, we're talking about oligosaccharides. They're not small, but they're not huge. They're kind of in the middle. And some of our foods do have oligosaccharides in them, but the big thing that you need to remember is that these are located in cell membranes. And then that brings us to polysaccharides. And polysaccharides are pretty interesting. These are huge, tremendous. And it's lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of simple sugars put together in a long chain. And polysaccharides are important because organisms use them to store energy for later. And then they're also used for structures. And some examples of polysaccharides are starches, cellulose, and glycogen. So these are some pictures of the different types of starches that you would see. The difference is how they're put together. So let me just kind of give you an idea right here. A starch is a 1 to 4 linkage of something known as an alpha glucose, and this is an alpha glucose right here. And when you put together alpha glucoses, you'll notice that how the oxygens point down, and this would be a 3-dimensional structure, they point down on this entire chain. Okay, this is a starch. We find starches in things like potatoes, onions, anything that grows underground especially is high in starch, because that's a root system that they depend on. We, of course, eat them, but if we didn't eat them, that's what they would live off of in order to survive when they need food. So it's their fuel storage for those plants. And so anything that grows under the ground is high in starch. Starch is important because, we eat starches for lots of energy. I had a friend who was a basketball player in college, and I can remember before a basketball game, she would eat a high starch meal, things like mashed potatoes and plain noodles, because they would break down and give her energy to push through the game. We can digest starch and get a lot of energy from it. Now, another form of a polysaccharide, though, is a cellulose. And cellulose is a little different. It's known as a beta glucose. A beta glucose is just put together a little bit differently. And if you look right here, this is a beta glucose. And if you notice, the way it's put together, you have this oxygen that goes up, which should be coming out of the page, and this one that goes down into the page, and then up, down, up, down, up, down. It's a little subtle difference, but that difference makes it completely behave in another way. Cellulose cannot be digested by us because of the way that the beta glucoses are linked together. This is what forms the structure of our plant cell walls. I tell people that good examples of cellulose that you can see with celery, and if you break celery, you'll see those stringy things. That's like a cellulose. We use these plant cell walls for things like furniture and housing because we depend on the wood. And cellulose is what's forming that strength in those plant cell walls. So we can't digest that because of the way that it's put together. Now, there are some organisms that can digest these beta linkages. Here's an example of them, a termite. If you get termites at your house, that can be dangerous because the termites will begin to eat the wood in the frame of your house, and it can cause structural damage to your home. We can't digest cellulose. Cows are a good example of something that can't digest cellulose. You hear cows, they chew cud. It's because they chew and chew and chew and chew and chew and chew on the grass, and they can't digest the cellulose, but they get as much of that material out of there as they can. And we're the same way. Corn is a good example. You can eat the corn, you can eat the stuff in the corn, but you go to the bathroom later on, you're going to see corn kernels come out because we can't digest that. So glycogen is known as animal starch. It's very similar to starch, but it's got branches rather than just these long chains. We store this in our liver and in our muscles, and then our bodies can pull from that for energy as needed. And this is a picture. This is what starch looks like. It's just these long chains. Every now and then it'll have a branch off, but look at glycogen. It's just branches and branches and branches of these sugar molecules, and so therefore it's a little bit different and it behaves a little different. Once again, all of this does structure and function have a very close tie. In order for something to function the way that it's supposed to, it has to have a certain structure. And if it has a different structure, it may not do what you want it to. And a good example is cellulose and starch. So that's it for this particular lecture. I would definitely go back, review through in your book, chapter 3. I think we've gone through sections 3.1 to 3.3. I would read through the section though on organic chemistry, macromolecules, functional groups, and carbohydrates, which is a lot more information that I'm not covering, but I'm instead hitting kind of the highlights. Our next lecture, we will look at lipids and nucleic acids, and then we will wrap up with proteins. Thank you, and see you later.